Let's go ahead and bring in Steiner Sports CEO, Brandon Steiner.
One of the country's top memorabilia mogul.
I have an unbelievable guest, Brandon Steiner.
Brandon's second to none.
Welcome back. Before you get all fat on your turkey, before you get all crazy and everybody's getting amped up, I figured time to get back with an old friend of mine who's really, you probably don't know necessarily what he would do, but so vital. I go way back, actually almost 30 years, with Barry Watkins, Chief Communications Officer at Madison Square Garden up until recently. And we're going to talk a little bit about a new venture, some new things that he's up to. And what I love is talking about transition, as you know. So if you're somebody who's always thinking about what else, what's next, not to mention communications, and we all know all communication is not equal, and we all know how important communications. This is probably the guy you go to when, frankly, you're in a jam or you want to know how something is twisted or turned. There's nobody more in the middle of this stuff that at least understands this stuff than Barry Watkins.
Thanks, Brandon.
I mean, I can't imagine. We used to call each other back when you were in the locker room.
I started with the Rangers in '83 as a student intern when I was at St. John's, and you were one of the first people I met, and you were just hustling your butt off. And you said, hey, if you can get me this player,
John Van Beesbroek
or Alex Kovalev, I give him $500 to be able to sign some cards. And like, all right, that's a win-win. You think I'm a great guy for getting you them. They thought I was the greatest guy in the world for getting them a little extra pocket money. They didn't make that much money
We
back
all
then.
didn't know what we were doing.
And I just came in for the first time ever, and I got a tour before we started this, and I couldn't believe, and you've told me, and I know how well you've done, of what I actually went and just witnessed. With some of the things that have, I could have sat there for hours.
There's crazy. A lot of history there, especially, the Garden has always been a phenomenal partner for us. I've always respected that building, always. That's, to me,
it's hallowed
there's
ground.
Nothing like Madison Square Garden.
And what they did, and again, the arena, not to get into it, the arena, what's great about it is it was a building built in 1968, and then what they did in, just a few years ago, where they decided it's an old arena, they need to change it, and they put in $1 billion, all of it their own money. They transformed the entire arena, like almost nothing like it was before. But yet they didn't lose the history. I was, sort of involved in that.
I think Joel Fisher.
Sure.
I don't want to give Joel too much credit. I don't want to give Joel too much credit. But he deserves a lot of credit.
But everybody, like they did from the first row to the last.
Yeah.
So whether you're an athlete in the locker rooms, whether you're a blue seater in the last row, you were the suite holder, it didn't matter who you were. There was something better for you. They didn't take any money from anybody other than their own Jim. Jim paid for the whole thing himself, basically.
It's pretty good.
I mean, it's an amazing
thing. But your job was just limited to Madison Square Garden.
No.
There's a lot more to Madison Square Garden than just Madison Square Garden, right?
My first
12
years was with the Rangers. 3 years as a student, 3 years as an assistant, and then 6 years as the PR guy when we met. And of course, winning the Stanley Cup in '97 was an awesome experience.
Our highlight. Let's not don't downplay that shit, man.
Highlight.
No. That's my favorite sports moment of all time. Other than the Game 7, we beat the Devils.
But the thing about that night is the Garden only holds for hockey 18,000, and 100,000 people in my lifetime have told me they were there.
No. I was there.
I know you were there.
There's no doubt, and I'm so glad I was there because there was so much money on the street offering for those tickets. And I went home, and I wasn't making a lot of money back then. I said, honey, they want to give me $10,000 a ticket for these tickets. And we didn't have a lot. You know what my wife said? There's no way you could sell that ticket. You have to go to that game.
What was crazy is
we were supposed to win.
We were supposed to win Game 5. We were up 3-1. We were supposed to win Game 5. That ticket was harder because we were coming home to be coronated the first Stanley Cup since 1940. It didn't quite go that way, and then we lost Game 6.
I'm glad. The more pent up craziness.
Right. But you never hear until the buzzer went off that night. You never, ever, ever hear anybody talk about how loud the Garden was that night because it wasn't. It was quiet. The Rangers are up
nerve-wracking.
2-0, then 2-1, 3-1, then it's 3-2. The whole third period, we're nursing a lead. They hit a post until the buzzer went off and the place went bananas.
How about the time? How about the Devil game when they score in the last 20 seconds?
Yeah, it was 7 or 8
how
seconds.
How quiet was it
between? Scored against Richter. Yeah.
How quiet was it in that building between?
2 overtimes.
That's the stuff, though, that that the emotional roller coaster of that.
It's crazy. So I left, right? So I left. I went from in '95. I had traveled full time with the Rangers for a lot of years. I stayed in the company and went to MSG.
You did stay
Network.
married through all this, right?
Yeah. My wife is like especially now that I'm not working as much. We had a great relationship when I wasn't home, and now that I'm home, we've really been challenged. But my wife Samantha is really,
give her
she's
credit.
like, people say,
That is an
how
adjustment.
you doing now since you've left? And I always say, oh, it's great. It's this and this. I've got all this flexibility. The only sort of loser in it is my wife Samantha.
Yeah, you're
because
in a
I'm
way.
home around a lot more. So our relationship after 30 years has been significantly
I like that.
challenged. But I left the Rangers, but I stayed within the company. I went to MSG Network, and I did PR and marketing for 2 years. That's when we had the Yankee rights and the Mets and Nets, and you couldn't have the football rights, but we had football shows with the Jets and Giants. So that was great because it taught me a whole different side of the business. And then in '97, I got promoted to run communications for all of Madison Square Garden, and that's just when it went from being an arena with 2 teams, concerts, college basketball, boxing,
Which is a lot, by the way.
TV network. But that's when we bought Radio City Music Hall in '98, and then the Beacon and Chicago Theater in the Forum, and then MSG Network spun off to be its own company. Now they own 50% of Tribeca Film Festival. They're building in Las Vegas. Since I've left, building in Las Vegas. They own 62% of Tao. So my job over the 20 years was to run communications and some other things for the overall company. And friends of mine were always like, oh, you do the Knicks and Rangers, and that clearly was a big part of my job. But the Garden became really the Madison Square Garden company.
That's a lot of stuff to worry about.
Yeah. That's why I slowed
like
down.
it.
That's why I slowed down.
All right. I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of stuff. Even on a positive note, just keeping up with all the positive, forgetting there could be a couple of negative or some other problems that occur once in a while. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
How do you keep track of all that?
Well,
are you like in every newspaper, every news? I mean,
yeah. I had a system.
Yeah.
Well, first off, is hiring good people.
Yeah.
Like I had, I don't know what the total numbers were because it wasn't just public relations. We also did ticketing and celebrity relationships. I ran the Garden of Dreams Foundation, lots of other stuff.
How is the? I got to interrupt. How is the Garden of Dreams doing overall?
Oh, it's amazing.
Now?
The things that it does, and MSG doesn't get enough credit for what they do. We built it in 2005. It's about the most unique foundation in all of sports and entertainment.
Why so?
Meaning, one reason is all of the Garden entities work together. So you could have kids that come through our system that get to meet the Rockettes and dance with the Rockettes, that they could meet the Knicks, the Rangers, they can come to games, use every asset of MSG to make these kids' lives better. But what they do is they work with 30 different partner organizations. Some are medical, like children's hospitals, Make-A-Wish and all that. Some are kids that are either poor or disadvantaged in some way economically. And what they do is they create these 3 things. They create these programs, 500 events in the last year alone for these children that come through these organizations. Then they go and they build facilities in some of the partners, so new gymnasiums, new dance studios. We just finished a project where we put $1.2 million into the Madison Square Boys and Girls Club in the Bronx, and then we do scholarships. So we pick kids. We have a whole system of where kids have to apply for it. And what we do is we stay in kids' lives. So when you're a Garden of Dreams kid, chances are you've done over a period of time a dozen, 20, 30 different interactions or activities, and you get to know. I left the Ranger game the other night. I went to the Ranger game last Monday night. They were playing the Canucks, and I walked out and I ran into little Liam Trainer, who's been a Garden of Dream kid for about 10 years or so. He's probably about 17 now, so he's been in since he's about 8 or 9. He's confined to a wheelchair. He's a great kid, great family. I just love them to death. And I left, and I didn't know he was coming to the game. He didn't text me. I'm not at all the games anymore. I just happened to be at that game, and I ran into him and his family. Here's how great it is. Michael Delzato plays now for the Vancouver Canucks. He left the Rangers. I think he went to Nashville, then he went to Philadelphia. Now he's with Vancouver. Delzato stayed in this kid's life all these years later, and Liam was invited to the game by Delzato because of the connection met. And there's great stories like that where these kids, there's a little kid named Oscar that performed in a talent show at Radio City when he was 3 years old. He just got out of chemotherapy. It was the cutest performance. He played the guitar and then he ran back and played the drums. Well, he's been in that talent show every year now. He's a 12-year-old healthy boy, and every year he comes back. And these people couldn't say enough good things about Garden of Dreams and what it does for him. It really makes
Dude, you get amped up, man. I mean, you get amped up.
I'm trying to keep up with you. What do you expect me to do?
I love it though, because that's what it's all about. The joy really is in helping others. It's
And
not a burden.
Right. And
it's a joy.
The great thing about
it's unbelievable.
I know we're sort of
Wow.
bouncing all over the place, but I left MSG
No, we're supposed to be bouncing
full-time.
all over the place.
Good. That's how this works. I'm
that's
glad.
how this works.
But in November, I left MSG full time. But one of the things that Jim and the people at MSG allowed me to do is stay as chairman of the Garden of Dreams Foundation. So that's still now a part of what I do. You know.
leaving Madison Square Garden. I mean, that's like a dream job, dream
Totally, yeah.
opportunity on a level that ain't a whole lot of other jobs like that. Hard? I mean, how's the transition of
Yeah, no, the
even just
transition's
thinking
been
about
good.
that? It's a lot of power, a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of
I
job.
loved every day I worked at MSG. Even when things didn't go particularly right for us, I loved every day I ever worked there. I was a kid, grew up in Brooklyn. I was a blue seater for the Rangers when I was, in the late 70s. I was in literally the last row. I had with two buddies and my father. We went to every Ranger game.
How do you know? But how do you know when to step down out of that? You
know,
had the slow down party,
yeah.
which we will talk about. But I mean, but how do you know how to step out of that?
Because you realize
it's such a cool gig,
Because there's parts of it that look, and there were parts of it that were fantastic. But for me, it was a little bit turning 50, meaning like my life was I went to every single event. I went at every Knicks. No. Every Knicks and Ranger game, several concerts, Radio City shows. I had to travel to L.A. for opening of Tao in the Forum and all that. I mean, it was a lot. It was a amount of nights, and then the difference is being on call. And knowing that, I had a system in place where every single thing said or written about any of our products or anything else in the industry I'd be interested in, there was a new services team that gave it to me in real time. So if somebody said something on the radio, if somebody wrote something on a website or a blog, I'd get it right away, and it'd be me to have to react to it.
So a lot of times, like, honey, I'll be right in a minute. And
well,
all
I
of a
can't
sudden,
tell you, Jeff Van Gundy quit when I was in Disney World, and the Rockettes went out and had a job, like almost like a sort of a strike when I was on a cruise ship, and Mess signed with Vancouver when I was at Hershey Park. I mean, the list goes on and on. So you live this life, and look, I would never change a thing about it, but you live this life of always being ready to spring into action because that's what it required. Even though I had great people working with me, and many of them.
So you're 50,
right?
though. You make this move. It's a monumental move, which, I think people are cut off their arm to be able to work at Madison Square Garden in this kind of position. Tell me what that first week was like.
It was weird. I have a place in Florida in Palm Beach Gardens. I went there, and it was very, very weird. The weirdest thing was waking up in the morning and not having to go to answer to read 100 to 150 emails that first morning. I had a system where I woke up at 6 o'clock every morning. I read all the things. These people got up at 4, and they had everything on my machine, so I could read everything right away because you had to react. And then it got harder because it wasn't just the morning; it was throughout the day. Websites don't post in the morning like a newspaper comes out. So that first few days of not having to jump and doing it was very, very, very unique to me. I never lived my life, even when I was younger, and there was no BlackBerry and there was no email. I every day of my life, I went to go get the newspapers at the local stand to see what I'd be reacting to. Right, that was the day.
The slowdown party. Why the slowdown? People out there, know familiar with the slowdown blog, which is very popular, very well received. Thank you.
That was the funniest thing. Yeah,
I didn't know what the hell a slowdown party was, and I was
not
like,
sure I really
I remember
knew
having some coffee with you, and you were telling me about this party. And I was like having a Jerry Seinfeld moment, going, I don't know, this guy seems a little, I don't know what he's even talking about, but it's Barry. I'm definitely going to the party, but I don't know what he's doing.
It was unique. Well, what I did was I decided when I was leaving MSG. Party. Well, I wasn't retiring. I'm 50. I was 52 at the time, 53 now. I'm not retiring. I'm just not working at the pace that I was. I'd probably work at a pace now, and I will talk about it, that's like a normal full-time job, but not what I was doing. And I wanted to take an opportunity. I've never been a guy that's thrown myself a birthday party or anything like that. Never once.
And I never see you out in front of much of anything, really,
but
right?
I decided that I've had this, as you say, this amazingly charmed life. I'm a roller hockey playing kid in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a Ranger fan. I call up the Rangers in 1983 and ask if I could work for free. And they say, sure, how's Monday? And I come in, and I've lived this life of the kid that loved going to the Garden. Now I'm helping to run the place. I have a big job, and I just wanted to take a moment, like one night, to take all of my family, my friends from home, all of my business friends, people that worked as part of my group, and to say thank you because somebody's contributed in some way to this life that I've been able to live. And the idea of the party, and I think it came off that way, was to have a bit of a tongue-in-cheek look at it and mock the fact that it was a slowdown and nobody ever heard of what a slowdown was. And I got a lot of grief for that from a lot of friends. But you know what? At the end of the day, I had 400 of my closest friends, whether they be people like you and our friends Mitch Modell and Tribeca and all that, or it was, a lot of guys from the '94 team came, but it was my friends that I do CrossFit with and my hockey playing friends, and for me to be able to talk about the people that I love and respect, and it was an opportunity to say thank you, and I was glad I did it. I didn't know how it would go until I
think you can never move forward unless you have gratitude for what's happened in the past, and you always want to settle up the past. And unfortunately, too many people wait till they die. That's what you talked about. It's like, why do we have to wait till a funeral to happen to say thank you to everyone and take note of all the things that have happened?
Right, like John Oliver said on the video, is my friend, and he said to me, it's almost like you've planned your own funeral or going to your funeral and you didn't have the politeness to die.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I just thought you did an amazing job. Just the tongue in cheek was cool, but just to remember and keep it real of how many people you thanked in about an hour.
Yeah. I was up there for a while.
But worth listening because it's just all about gratitude, gratefulness.
Well, you think about the life
that
I had. Like, even when I left the Rangers and I stayed at MSG for so many years, like the amount of late nights and all that, the people that helped my family. I mean, I have two kids are now in the business. Jeremy works for a PR firm in the city, and my daughter works at a company called Tribeca. And they sort of follow my footsteps, and they're doing communications and all that.
We can mention Cloris Associates, by the way.
About that. Well, my son left. He was at DKC.
Oh, he was at DKC. And where's he now?
He's working with Matt Hiltzig, who's another friend of mine in the.
I like Matt Hiltzig. Matt Hiltzig used to be with Cloris, though, no?
No.
Or he used to be a Fleischman.
No, Matt was worked. No, he's had his own firm now for 10 years. He was at Miramax before that. But
he does crisis.
Matt's
I think he worked with Ray Rice.
Yeah, Ray Rice, Teo.
Yeah, I dealt with him on Ray. He's a brilliant guy.
Matt is great, and the place
Matt's
I
a
work
good
at,
guy,
I'll say,
man. Yeah.
And now, like again, we're sort of got a lot of balls in the air. But what we do is that's good because we've got balls. I feel good about that. But the idea is for me now at 50 years old to say, you know what, like being on call, as great as it was, and I felt needed, I felt like, I really felt like, great about it. It wasn't as fun anymore. It wasn't as fun as, being, on the beach, which I'm not a big beach person, but my wife wants to go to the beach. We go to the beach for a couple hours on a Sunday in July, and I've got to leave the beach because something goes on, and I'm getting bad reception, and I got to, it becomes over a period of time. I mean, and for me, everybody's different. Everybody sort of what makes you tick.
You're an all-in guy. You're not going half into it.
So I didn't really have a great plan when I left MSG. So that's when I decided and said, okay, I'm going to do Garden of Dreams, which was nice of Jim to do that. I joined the board of the Vector Group. That was another thing. Then I went. Our mutual friend Dan Cloris called, who owns DKC, who to me is the greatest PR firm in.
And coming on this platform tomorrow, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Dan Cloris, I would not be here without him.
Yeah, Dan Cloris has been, he hasn't done.
He's my first PR guy.
Yeah, no, I know. You give him credit for making all of this.
I'm his first sports client, and he calls Peter Seligman in, God rest his soul, and says, Peter, this is our first sports client, your first sports client, and if you don't do a great job, it'll be your last. In 2 months, he's coming back to this office. If he doesn't rave about you, I'm firing you. I'm like,
that's great,
in front of that kid.
He's a brilliant guy.
Yeah, Dan's brilliant.
He built a PR firm in the city, now called DKC.
Yeah.
It's run by a guy that's named Sean Cassidy, who's the president of the company. And I'll tell you,
Amazing.
I never worked on that side of the business, obviously, because I was at MSG, but learning, and this is a great firm. Dan built it up. I think there's over 200 people there now. They have offices in San Francisco and LA, Miami, Chicago, Washington, D.C. They've got a hub, obviously, in New York City. They do an amazing job. They got great clients. And to watch that side of the business, the hustle to get clients, to service clients like you. And Dan built an amazing business, and Sean does a great job running it. And I go in, I'm of counsel. I go in, a couple days a week. I set up different projects for them. I sort of help them in any way that I can. But I'm not dealing with press. I'm not pitching stories. I'm not dealing with crisis. I'm helping them. And it's been great for me. And then I said to myself, when I was leaving MSG, what do I really love about the business? You must have things that you just love about your
favorite
business.
things.
What do I love
What's
about
your
the
happy
business?
day look
to
like?
To me, my best time
your happy
was
day,
when you call it a happy day?
What's your happy day? Yeah, what's your happy day?
Well, Garden of Dreams was always one. But in terms of the public relations or communications aspect of it, I loved when I trained or prepared people, anybody, meaning it could be Jim preparing Jim for an interview, or our CEO, any executive of any kind, a player, a coach, any of our management people, to prepare them to go into sort of battle with an interview, and to knowing that they're going to do something and I'm going to prepare them for it, and I'm going to make sure they understand how the media can be advantageous to them and get their message out and what they're trying to do, how it could be hurtful.
Who was your best student? Who's been some of your best students in the past?
I love, I'll tell you, I don't want to get into too much of who was easy or not at the Garden, but the guy that I really respected that was, in terms of a student, was Steve Mills. So Steve's now the president of the Knicks.
Love Steve.
We worked together for a long time, and then Steve left, and then he came back, and he's now the president, and he and I are good friends. He's a guy, last year, he had just hired Scott Perry to be the new general manager of the team. And I was still at the Garden at the time. And I helped prepare Steve and Scott for the announcement that Steve was going to be president and Scott was going to be GM. And then a couple of months later, we prepared for Media Day. And the day of Media Day, as the season was starting, the big sort of elephant in the room was whether Carmelo was going to be a Knick or not be a Knick. So we had this major prep session the night before, went into Media Day, handled all the Carmelo questions and all that. And then it was a 2-hour session, and it went really well. And then Saturday, Steve calls me and says, by the way, we're going to trade Carmelo. This all happened last night, so now we got to be available again. So we prepped again, and this time that Carmelo was gone. And Steve and Scott, they so appreciated it, because everything, and again, you don't really tell them what to say. That's not the idea. Unless somebody wants you to. You're saying, here's your message points, right? And everybody should do this, because that's not, they're basketball people. There's CEOs that they do run companies. They're not PR people, right? Players play. They practice before they play. They're not skilled. Most of them aren't. Some people are naturally gifted. But Steve and Scott, they're smart, thoughtful, intelligent people. But they understand that they don't do this for a living. They're about to walk into, I just mentioned 3 quick sessions, 1 in July and then 2 on consecutive, on a Friday and a Monday before and after the Carmelo trade. And we had prepped, and again, you go through and say, here's what you're going to get. Tell me what you're thinking of saying, and if you want my opinion about, is that, what's the chess game? If you say this, well, what's the follow-up? And to me, it's a skill that I was able to develop over my time. I did it for a living, so somebody like Steve was somebody that really appreciated the dialogue and felt like that when he went into a session, he was much better prepared for that to be a successful session, whether it be a live one-on-one session with Mike Francesa, whether it'd be a scrum with 20 people around him, whether it be Q&A, whatever format it was going to be, they would feel better about that. So now I've decided to create a business with my partner, Gary Furman. We named it Clairvoyant Media Strategies.
Love Gary.
Gary's great, right?
Love
Clairvoyant
Gary, yeah.
Media Strategies, which is named after my mom, Claire Watkins. And we basically said, okay, I'm going to now make a living of this. We first launched it in October, and now I'm taking on clients both in sports and not that can use, or maybe they know they need it, maybe some don't know, and other people are telling them that they should.
So you go through, is it going through some media training and then you're on call as issues come up?
No,
because as a CEO, you're in a million directions.
Every client's different. Most people I'm working with have PR people internally, and that are good at what they do, and they're the professionals. But media training, like at MSG, I was that person, but oftentimes we hired outside trainers to come in once a year. They were nothing to do with crisis, but they basically came in once a year, and they give you the rules of the road, and then it's maybe an hour of a presentation of here's the do's and don'ts. Don't answer a hypothetical here. Show examples of people that have done it well and people that haven't done it well, and
just
where
because
they can
somebody
get
asks
tripped
you a
up.
question doesn't mean
you have to answer it. Right? Don't answer a hypothetical and all that. And basically, we did it for years where we had outside trainers. And then as the years went by, I liked doing the training myself. I felt like I had seen enough of these sessions, and I felt like I could do the training and then separately do the prep. So what I do now for companies, and I just launched it in October, so we're starting out. And what I do is go in the once a year, and I work with the PR people, the professionals that are within those organizations, and set it up so that the person I'm working with knows that you've got a professional in the office next door. Don't go into this and think that you're the PR professional that you are. That you're not. You're not somebody that has all the answers. And the amount of mistakes that people make at every level. Like one of the examples I use is Bill Clinton, who in our lifetime is one of the great communicators of all time.
How did he make a mistake?
In July, he went on the Today Show, and he's promoting a book with James Patterson.
Yep.
And here's again, he's a tremendous. So it just shows you if he can make a mistake, and if anybody hasn't seen that, they should go. And you got to watch the full 22 minutes.
It is 15, a blunder.
15 minutes. He's launching a book tour to promote this book that he's done with James Patterson, which apparently was very good. It's a fictional book. Yeah, 15 minutes. I forget the host who did it. Asked him all these lollipop questions, and it was really like, oh, the book is great. Oh, who came up with this idea? What did you do? What did you do? It's a beautiful thing. And then all of a sudden, 15 minutes in, it's, if you were president today in the Me Too movement and what happened with Monica Lewinsky, and all of a sudden it's a confrontational final 7 minutes of the interview. He answered a hypothetical, what if you were president? Well, you're not president today. It didn't seem like he was prepared, which seems hard to believe. And then he goes on the book tour and everything that comes up. So he goes on Colbert the next night, and that's the first question. So to me, it's like if somebody like Bill Clinton did it. Rudy Giuliani was hired by Trump to talk about the Russia investigation. He went on all the shows and all that, and then he goes and does something in Israel, and they throw a question about the Stormy Daniels thing, and all of a sudden Rudy Giuliani, who's again somebody who's amazingly good at this, starts talking about what Melania thought of Stormy Daniels and all that, and then Melania put out a statement that whatever Rudy said wasn't the right thing. He just got away from talking about what he was there to talk about. So what the training does is say, look, it doesn't mean you're saying anything wrong. In that case, a couple people did, but understand what's coming, and that even if you believe in something, understand that if you say it, what's the next step? Does it take away from the book tour? Does it take away? We have an example I use too with Mike Richter, who's a friend of both of ours. He was at the Slow Down party. He's a great guy. Mike Richter was playing for the Rangers in 2001, and it was right after 9/11. And he's an American kid, an American goalie, probably one of the great American players of all time. And we pitched a story, or the Rangers, John Rosasco pitched a story from a columnist at Newsday to come up and do a story on the team, because getting publicity for hockey in September is not easy. And getting a columnist there to talk about the Rangers and all that, with baseball going on and football and all that, the woman, it was Jeanette Howard, I think it was a female columnist for the Newsday. She asked Mike a question about what do you think of President Bush saying we're going to get Osama bin Laden dead or alive. And Mike gave a very thoughtful, he's very, very intelligent young man.
Mike is not a typical hockey player.
Right. And he gives a very thoughtful answer that he didn't agree with President Bush saying it that way, and it's not very presidential. He gave his whole view of it, right? Didn't say anything wrong, didn't say anything he wishes he could take back. But two things happen. One is that story that was going to be about, wow, the Rangers look good this year, buy tickets, went to complete opposite. It was Mike Richter's commentary on that. That's one thing that happened. Then the next day, where the Rangers may have 4 or 5 media people at practice, there was over 100 media people at practice, not sports people, camera crews like crazy, because now Mike had gone from being this hockey goalie to a critic of the President of the United States, and he felt bad about it because he's like, I didn't see it coming. And those 100 people, they didn't just go and talk to Mike Richter. They went to the coach. They went to every member of the team and said, and all of a sudden it became a distraction for the team the next day. So I think Mike used to, at the time, it said, I don't know if you remember it, but it said, you know what? I wish I didn't say that because I didn't need to cause a distraction this way. So that's what the training does. The training basically says...
Is that now where you're going to spend a good amount of your time?
Exactly.
Media training?
Yeah, I think...
You enjoy it. This is what you love doing.
I love doing it. And to me, when I worked at the Garden...
also, right?
It was, right. It's the chess game of what goes on. It's preparing people. And especially, look, I'm working all over the country, but especially in New York, because New York has a life of its own. There's amazing competition between the News and the Post and FAN and ESPN radio, and, the best of the best is here. This is where the late night shows are. This is where the morning shows are. So I think that, and it's understanding too, like when you say something, think about most people when you do an interview, right? Even a CEO sits down with a reporter from X publication. And they do an interview for, maybe an hour, maybe a half an hour. And then they read the story the next day, and there's snippets of what they said, right? And with athletes, it happens every single time. Turn on a TV, and you'll see a quick interview with player X. And that play was in the locker room for 5 minutes, and you're seeing maybe 7 seconds of what they say. Nothing. That's being edited. Then
what scares me in today's world is that we don't get to hear from a lot of CEOs. They're sprinting away from it because there's always so many twists and turns between social media, what camera's on, what tape recorder's on. But yet, with the right training, there's a golden opportunity to communicate to your base.
Right.
And you've seen the transition when somebody does get it right. It's amazing what kind of base and how much good you could do with the media.
It could be an unbelievable advantage.
It's a win-win.
And remember to think about it too. Like in our days when we met, it was only media, right? That was it. Like if you were going to get your message out to anybody, you went to a
2, 4, 5, 7, 9,
and the Times News Post and Newsday, right? That's what you did. Now there's two other ways of getting your message out. One is the obvious way, which is social media, right? Which is both fantastic to be able to deliver messaging and information about products and all that, but it's also amazingly dangerous because people are now saying things publicly without thinking and all that, and then there's a backlash that's immediate, and you can't take it back. I love when people delete tweets. Who gives at that point? Like if you're out there, you're out there. But what people do now that I think is really effective is they put out oftentimes their own messages, not just on social media, but look at what LeBron did. When LeBron went back to Cleveland, if you remember this or not, he did an as told to. He put why he was making the decision to leave Miami and go back to Cleveland. He told it to Sports Illustrated under his name. So by LeBron James, why I'm making this decision. He didn't have a press conference. He didn't add anything. So if you were going to write, which the world was interested on where LeBron was going, he just put it out exactly the way he wanted to. Think about the Players Tribune that your friend Derek Jeter started, or was one of the people that started. Now, like Matt Harvey, who didn't do great with the press in New York here every day, when there was that big controversy back in the year that the Mets went to the World Series, they were trying to get into the playoffs. He had pitched more innings than any pitcher coming off Tommy John surgery. His agent had gone public and says, look, I don't know that he can keep pitching because I got to worry about him long term. And it was a huge controversy. And the way Matt answered it, I don't know if he wrote it or who wrote it for him, but he wrote something about how he felt about it, the risk he was putting himself under, had a great message that said, hey, I'm here for my teammates, I'm here for the fans. He put it on the Players Tribune, didn't say a word about it, and that was as good as Matt ever looked in New York.
That's a blessing now. If you want to come up with your statement, there's a vehicle to do that, but you do need a little training to make sure the message
of course,
is right.
And understand what that message is and when is the right way to go there or not. Meaning, like, sometimes, like, Matt was eventually going to have to meet the press, right? He was going to be available the next day. But to understand, we go through that too in the training sessions, is we go through when is the right time to be readily available to sit down and do an interview. Should it be an interview where you're talking to a reporter who's going to put in context the way they want to put it in context? Is it better to go do a live interview with Michael Kay or Mike Francesa or anybody along those lines? Because then people hear the questions, they hear the complete answer. If you say something wrong, you say something wrong, but there's not going to be a context problem.
It's not going to get edited to not your liking.
There's no way, because they're hearing the questions.
Which is my problem. Like, sometimes I'll do an interview and I'm like, wow, I did say that, but there were a lot of sentences before and after.
Right. And everybody at your
crazy
level, anybody that does media, that talks to media, has that, and it's just part of the way the world works. Is everybody has that. I mean, just think of that athlete. You know, there are league rules that I think it's 5 or 10 minutes after a game, the locker room opens up. All the players, either right away or at some point in the next few minutes, have to be available. And the media swarms in, and they have like a gaggle or a scrum around the person. They talk to that person for 5 or 8, maybe 10 minutes, and then the next day they see this much. And always those people are aggravated at times because is it really exactly what they meant to say? And one of the parts of the training we do too is to understand, don't leave it up to the reporter to take what you say and put it in the way you want it. Try to speak in a way where if they just pick a little bit out of it, that it's going to be what you want it to be. And that's part of the training. And that's one of the hardest parts for somebody to do it, because when you have a conversation, you're not thinking of you're going to read this much of that conversation.
You're also realizing that person's asked you the same question 3 different times, 3 different ways.
Of course, right.
Meaning they're definitely twisting what they're looking for something that you
course.
haven't given them yet,
right.
which is always bothersome.
Right. I was talking to Porzingis about this a few weeks ago, where he's coming back from an injury, and we're laughing about.
Love him, man. By the way,
he's a great kid.
Love him.
We're laughing about it because we were laughing about how many different ways when he was last available he was asked about when he was coming back, and he won't answer. So then they go to everybody else. They go to the coach or whatever, because that's a big thing in New York sports. Is when is he coming
Barry,
back.
how are players doing overall? On broad stroke, moving away from the Garden for a minute, but just in general. I mean, we've been doing this a long time compared to where they were. Are players taking media more seriously in this training that you talk about that you're doing? Are they respecting that more, or is it?
I think so. I still think that the good ones, the Aaron Rodgers in his day, Peyton Manning and Pat Riley's the best that I've ever seen. Like there's people that do it really, really well, and then there's people that don't because they don't realize, they think they're the experts. No, you play ball for a living, right? But the issues that still sort of amaze me is the amount of issues that people create for themselves on social media. Like, I almost can't believe that now that Twitter and it's been available since I think 2010 it started or something like that, and 8 or 9 years later, to think about that people are still saying things and then wishing they didn't say it is crazy to me. That athletes especially wouldn't understand that what you put out on social media, it's the same publicly as saying it in the locker room. You're saying something publicly, and they don't understand. It's one thing in the beginning of Twitter where people didn't understand. I have a funny story where
they don't know better.
I have a funny story. They didn't know better. Nate Robinson, who was sort of a character at the Knicks, right?
One story with Nate, or
well, there's a lot, but this one is about that, which is so the Knicks play in Atlanta. I didn't go to travel with the team, but I watched the game at home, and the Knicks had a big win. I think Mike D'Antoni was coaching, if I remember correctly. So it was like 2010, 2011, something like that. Twitter had just started. And I get a call after the game. And that game, Nate, I think for the first time in his career, he was a DNP. He didn't play. D'Antoni, whether he was sending him a message or the way the game was going, he just didn't put Nate in. And Nate was, he's a young guy. He was a sort of a hot-headed guy, would just sort of say anything. And I get a call from Jonathan Sopranowicz, who's the head of Knicks PR, who's with the team, and he was responsible for interaction in and around all the games with the press. So he calls me and says, if I don't open the locker room in 10 minutes, we're going to get fined. I forget what the fine was, 25 or 50,000. Can I take the fine? I think if I have 5 more minutes, I can calm Nate down and get him to say the right things, that the team won the game, and I've got to work harder to play better and all that. Can we take the fine? I can't go and call somebody to check. I've got to make a decision, and it's, okay, let's take the fine, and if you think you can calm him down. So we did it, and it worked exactly perfectly so Nate got there. We took the fine. Nate goes in the locker room. Nate says all the right things, and he says, whatever coach decides is okay by me. I got to play better. I got to hustle more, whatever he said. We won the game. That's all that matters. And then he's on his way to the bus, and he tweets out all of his honest thoughts, not realizing that was the same as staying in the locker room. So obviously the next day, all the press, it wasn't anything about what he said then. So we took the fine, but we still had the issue. But now, when you see things like that, and there's so many examples, it's crazy to me. Even if somebody in sports thinks something like really asinine, like they have these thoughts about other people in life, about people's lifestyle, anything at all, like, think about it in your own home. Like, have your crazy thought in your own home. But the idea of putting it out on a tweet, I mean, there's been players, it happens in Europe all the time with some of the soccer teams. They get kicked off the team. I mean, it's a crazy.
That's crazy, man.
It's the idea that they could do that and not. I think it's gotten a little bit better. At the Garden, we dealt with a lot of issues like that, like the Nate example.
But when you're training, you're just talking about really a lot of basic stuff, even. So because you're not biased anymore. It's not like you're working for the Garden. You're making sure that there's pro Garden, let's say, or pro whatever. No. You're now helping somebody with their brand, and every coach really should be concerned with that.
And what you do is you go through it. You do the training, and it's. I mean, is it basic? I'd like to think it's a little bit beyond basic, but it covers everything they should think about, and I think what it does, it gives them a better chance for success. It's once a year, the training that they go in, and they do it. But then what we do as part of the session is we have these very, I would call them challenging mock interviews. So I went and did a coach just a month ago, and it was a new coach, had never been a coach at the highest level before. And we went in and we did the training, and then I said, okay, well, now let's pretend I'm doing a live interview with you and I'm the host. Let's go and do that. And then after that, I was a print reporter, and let's practice that. And we went through these sessions, and then I had somebody else in the room along with me saying, did they follow the training? Did they leave themselves exposed? How did they do? And they said to me, it was the hardest interview they ever did. And I said, bingo, that's how it's supposed to be. Because if you can handle these tough questions I'm giving you, you're going to be more prepared, and you're not going to be as worried about it. Yeah, well, that's an advantage.
Yeah,
that's an advantage. There's a lot of trainers out there that, there's some great ones that have seen similar things that I've seen, but because of the experience that I've got, I can say, look, and there was times in my career where I wish that I did something differently or handled it better. So I've got the experience now to say, look, I maybe learned from doing it right. Maybe there were times I learned from doing it wrong. Maybe I watched other situations, and now I'm in a place now where using my experience to be able to say, look, I'm going to work with other people and make it in a way that's, the clients so far have come away and said, hey, that was the best money that I spent in a long time.
Having fun?
Yeah, I love it. It's great. Life is like...
You're full. Your glass is full.
I think so. Well, you told me when I slowed down, that you only slow down when you speed up. So I felt the pressure from you to make sure that I had something good going.
I wasn't buying all the slow down, but what I did buy is I think a lot of people are hesitant to have the balls when you walk away from such a prestigious situation as you were in. Not that you walked completely away, because you still have garden dreams, but. It's
I was in the midst of everything.
That's that's a life,
But I felt like, look,
I give you a lot of credit though.
Yeah, no, I felt like at this time in my life, it was about a year ago, it was the right thing for me to do, and I didn't know that I'd be doing media training and working at DKC. I knew about Garden of Dreams. And I'm lucky because I left my full-time role at MSG, but I'm still friendly with people there. I go to games. I'm going tomorrow night to the Ranger Islander games. I still feel like it's home.
You've been going to Ranger games forever, though. You're never getting that out of your blood.
Yeah. No, I love hockey. I mean, look, I've grown to love basketball and sport, but to me, I grew up playing roller hockey.
Yeah.
I idolized Eddie Jockman and the Rangers.
Eddie.
And for me, like, I love the game of hockey. Any night I can turn on the NHL network and watch a game and feel like I like not having to watch the game or not having to go. That it's more of a choice to go.
Or you're not worrying about the business. The reason.
Because that's the thing too. Like it's like when you're there, you're not a fan. You're not a fan in a way that others are, because you're working with people that are, their jobs are impacted by wins and losses.
You got accountability.
Yeah, no, it's
a
responsibility. And there's things that happen. Years ago, I remember I was at a Ranger game, minding my own business, and all of a sudden there's somebody that goes up on an escalator on the 7th floor, and there's something wrong with the escalator, and a kid gets the thumb sliced, and they're worried about saving the thumb, and all of a sudden you're springing into action.
There's a lot of things that happen in an arena, but you got 20,000 people.
It's amazing.
A lot of things happen
something can happen
every night.
Something can happen. You could be sitting at home on a July day, and one of your athletes gets pulled over for DUI. In 1987, I got a call from Phil Esposito on New Year's Day. We're making one of the biggest trades in Ranger history. We're trading Mike Ridley for Bobby Carpenter. There are things that happen because you're working in an environment. You work in the entertainment environment where people generally would work 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, and then they go to be entertained, and they're coming to my world. And newspapers are every day, right? So you don't have, I've had issues on Christmas Day. I've worked Christmas Day and all that. I've spent time on I can't tell you where I spent Thanksgiving. In 1991 was Winnipeg, and 92 was Minnesota, and Quebec one year. And that's just part of the life that you've got. And again, I wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't have had it any other way. But now I really like what I'm doing. I feel, as you can tell, I feel energized about this next stage of my life. And, really, really fortunate to be in the position I'm in.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by, man. I appreciate it. It's unbelievable when I look at the work you've done. But then I think you're probably going to have an impact on a lot of players and coaches. Because when I see, and then we do a lot of players right here, even in this room, and I'm like, wow, I wish this guy would just get some media training, because his answers just could be just a little tighter, a little better. A lot of these guys have great stories of women, but they just don't think.
Right. But think about it.
Think
about it. They don't do what I now do for a living.
Yeah.
Like, think about everybody that comes in here. Outside of probably me, maybe Dan Cloris tomorrow, they don't do that for a living. Yeah. So what happens is, they always think, because they're smart people and they think that they've sort of got it down, but they play for a living, they coach for a living, they manage companies for a living. It's that you don't just show up and say, I'm now going to go think about strategically how I'm going to do a media interview, or whether I should do a media interview, or how to do it, or all that. They just, and as many people that I've talked to that say, I don't need media training, I've got it. And I show them the example of, here's Clinton, here's Neil Portnow, the head of the Grammys, here's Giuliani, here's people that are really, really good at this, and they've made mistakes. But I think the
It's an
people
expensive
that
mistake,
yeah,
too.
yeah, no. I mean, there's people that have, there's a story. And there's a story. A guy named Raymond Moore. I think that was his name. Raymond Moore, Indian Wells, the tennis tournament in California. He had been there forever. He built up this tennis tournament. Was a CEO. And, it's a pretty prestigious tournament. It wasn't a major, but it was probably one of the big ones on the circuit. And he just has a regular availability one day. You look it up, go online and look it up. And he has a regular availability. And all of a sudden he gets a question about the women athletes. And he goes, what I would say is the women athletes, they should kiss the feet of Nadal and Federer, because if the men didn't do what they do, it was a crazy statement. You're looking at me like, how could he have done that? Go online and look at this. Well, there was an outrage right away, and then he was gone as CEO, within a few days. Here's a guy that was there for 30 years. One interview session that he didn't prepare for, wasn't thinking about it, didn't go into that thinking, oh, you know what, this is my message today. My message is to really speak negatively and cause outrage among the female athletes. He didn't go into that thinking that way. But here's a guy that's smart enough to be the CEO of a tennis tournament and make a mistake like that. I show that one and say, I know it sounds crazy, but there's somebody that achieved a lot in life that did this. So that's the idea, is to prepare people so that they don't make those mistakes. And the opposite, they use those platforms as an opportunity to deliver messages, to sell products, to sort of get the messages out there that are best for them.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming by.
This was
Appreciate
awesome.
it.
Thanks.
Awesome.